Welcome to this little garden of mine. Today I'd like to talk to you about the plan I created for my raised garden beds. So come along with me and get some great ideas for your own. So this year I decided to use a digital planning method. Last year I planned out my garden beds on graph paper, which is great, but sometimes I just prefer things on the computer. There's lots of programs out there that you can subscribe to do your garden beds. They look fun, they look fancy, but I just wasn't willing to pay for a subscription. And then not only that, once I was done with the subscription, where does all of my stuff go? I probably would lose any work I had done. So I decided to not do that, and then realized that I could try out Google Slides for planning my garden bed. So I have a separate video on how I did that. If you would like to watch it, there will be a link in the comments below, and you can watch how to create your garden beds with Google Slides. Today, I'm just going to talk to you about what I put into the program for my plan that I'm going to have for this 2024 growing season in East Tennessee. So on the first slide here, I have all of the plants that I am growing. I put them all in here by size, and you can see I've made different shapes for each of those sizes. Again, the details on how to do that are in the other video. Plant spacing is important. I am using it as a guide for how I want to plant everything in my beds. I currently have seven raised garden beds, and after doing my plan, I realized we are going to add 3 more. So this year I have decided to plant more flowers in my garden and be intentional about the flowers I plant. The few I planted last year just flopped, but I really didn't pay much attention to them. So I have one specific bed here that did not grow much of anything last year on purpose. So this year I am going to plant lavender, zinnias, and echinacea in that flower bed. And so it will be just fully flowers to kind of encourage pollinators and of course hopefully try to draw the pest control bugs into the garden as well. And so right next to that bed, I have decided to plant some green beans, broccoli, butter crunch lettuce. I have marigolds, and then these are rectangles for my carrots. This year I am practicing some more interplanting and companion planting in my garden. I watched a video that kind of encouraged the way that I put my plants into the garden bed, leaving less empty space and taking up more space with plants. I wanted to grow more carrots. And so one of the ways I'm doing that is putting these large rows of carrots in several of my beds. And so the companion planting and the interplanting are fairly new to me. And so this is where Google has been a great friend of mine. You can do a quick Google search, even while you're out in your garden. Do a quick Google search. Here I've done tomato companion plants. And you see it pulls up right away a list of several companion plants. Obviously, I'm not going to plant every single one of these next to my tomatoes, but I have several of these things that I can plant next to my tomatoes. And then it also, if you just add pest control to your search, it will even show you plants that are good to deter pests from your tomato plants. So you can do that with any of the plants that you're growing, any of the food that you're growing. Just search companion plants and then even pest control, because you'll pull up a little bit different. That's why I have done the flowers, more of the flowers, been intentional about that for pest control purposes. And then also different foods put nutrients into the soil while others take those same nutrients out of the soil. So it's good to, companion planting is built with that in mind also. And so on the bed, this is an additional bed we're building next to those two I just showed. And you can see I have my jalapenos with my eggplant, banana peppers, and then okra in the middle with rosemary at each end. I will be putting echinacea in this flower bed, or this raised bed, to help with the pest control. It does different things with the pest control of these particular plants. And then also, again, another row of carrots on either side of this bed. The great thing about putting the carrots in, my jalapenos and banana pepper plants, they are a very small space down on the ground, and they grow quite large up on the top. Kind of an upside down Christmas tree, so to speak. So it's a good place to put the carrots on the ground underneath those. And they're spaced out well on the edge of my bed so that they get plenty of sunlight still, and then even shading on the hot days when they need it. And you can see I've also added a space for notes on my digital plan. In this particular bed, I'm going to use a small tomato cage for the jalapenos based on experience from last year. And I'm going to use a large tomato cage for the banana peppers and the eggplants. I have learned the hard way that those tomato cages are not really made for tomatoes. The tomatoes get entirely too large for those flimsy, cheap tomato cages that they sell at the hardware store. But they are great for the peppers, and I'm hoping they'll work well for the eggplant. This is actually the first year that I'm going to grow eggplant. We've had it once or twice in a restaurant, and it was pretty good, so I figured, why not grow it? I'm also excited about echinacea. It actually looks like a little purple cone flower, but it has, other things that you can do with it as well. It's a usable flower. It's not just simply for pest control. On my next column of beds, I'm going to do my zucchini and squash. I'm just going to do 2 of each of those plants this year because last year I had an abundance. My zucchini sprouted really well, and I got excited and just planted them all. So I literally had enough zucchini to feed my entire church family. They loved it, but I'm confident this year that I'll still have enough zucchini and squash for our family and still plenty to give away. And so with the squash bugs were terrible last year, so I'm hoping this year with doing a rotation, my zucchini and squash are in a different bed this year from last year. And then the nasturtium flowers are good pest control for squash bugs. And then also marigolds. Now I did not put as many flowers around the bottom of this bed because I know the zucchini and squash grow to be quite large. They take up a good amount of space in the garden beds. I do hope to possibly consider staking them somehow. I saw several things about it last year, so I am considering doing that. It just kind of depends on how all of the rest of the growing goes. Now, in this bed next to it, I have actually already sorted out several of my strawberry plants. I pulled them out from my current strawberry bed and have placed them in this bed to overwinter. And so I have several rows of strawberries already in the bed. And then next to those, I plan to put some romaine lettuce and then green beans. Again, those are all great companion plants and help with putting nutrients into the soil that are needed, and even some pest control scenarios in that as well. And then I did also read that petunias help with the Mexican beetle that I had a big problem with last year. So I'm hoping to try and cut back on that this year. And then I did read the petunias are supposed to help with that. So I'm planning to just grab some petunias from the hardware store at this point and plug them in wherever I have space as I begin my planting. And that's the great thing about this digital bed. I literally just decided about the petunias today, so I haven't placed them on the bed. But it's really easy. If once I print this, I just pencil them in, or I can copy, one of the green bean plants and put the petunias on my plan around the bed. So it is easy to edit this plan, although it was a little time consuming to actually go through and make it. I know that especially next year, it'll be a lot easier to move things around for how I want to grow. So in my next column of beds, you see I already have, this is actually a bed with strawberries already in it. That was my original strawberry bed last year. And so it's overflowing with strawberries. And so it will remain strawberries this year. And next to it, I already started growing asparagus. Asparagus actually stays in place for many years. And so that will stay there. And you want to try and keep it undisturbed. So I did not plant anything too close to it, but I know the basil and the nasturtium are good companion plants, and they also help with pest control. I added in some spinach right there next to the nasturtiums, just to have another little space with spinach. And then the garlic. I have garlic at the end of that bed that I planted back in the fall. And so it is already there and already growing. So next to this bed is where I have my tomatoes this year. I am growing 4 of the Roma tomatoes. And then I have a couple of beefsteak tomatoes, and then my cherry tomatoes are actually Isis candy tomatoes. So I'm growing 2 sets of those also. Of course, marigolds are a common pest control companion plant for tomatoes, so I have those in there. And of course, basil to go along with that. So you see I put the marigolds at one end and the basil at the other, and then also have a marigolds fixed in the center. The tomatoes are another one that they grow smaller at the bottom but more up at the top, so I have 2 rows of carrots in this bed as well. These are 2 new beds that we're going to build for this year. So I have my sweet potatoes and russet potatoes through the center of that bed, with onions growing on either edge, and then spinach growing in front and in back of that bed. Now, I have not grown potatoes or onions before, so I do know that sweet potatoes get viney, so I'm not sure how well my spinach will do there, but it'll be a ground cover if nothing else, and help with some of the potato beetles that I have heard about. So worst case scenario, it'll just be a nice companion plant, and we may or may not get to eat actual spinach from there. In the bed next to that, I have my watermelon, spaghetti squash, and cantaloupe. This will be my first year growing the melons. We did grow some spaghetti squash some time ago, and I know all 3 of these get large vines, and you can grow them out on the ground, but I know our spaghetti squash took up a lot of space on the ground, so I do not desire to do that. But I'm still determining how we're going to trellis all of those. And so then for pest control, I also have the nasturtium and marigolds in this bed. And then the butter crunch, just a nice place to have a little bit of extra lettuce to grow. The lettuce is actually, the different lettuces and spinach is actually a great ground cover to place into different spots of your bed wherever there is empty ground. Because empty ground means places for weeds to grow up. So instead of having a lot of empty ground, I'm hoping to fill that with lettuce, with flowers, whatever small plants I can squeeze in as my garden begins to grow. I'm just kind of learning and playing with that this year. So I have my basic plan laid out. And as this year goes on, I plan to make notes about what works, what doesn't work, and go from there. So I hope that this has helped give you some ideas of how to plan your garden. And I am really loving the design of this digital garden bed layout that I have made. If you're interested in doing that, again, I have a video on my YouTube channel, This Little Garden of Mine, on how to design your garden beds. And this is completely free. Google Slides is free. You can make this on any other program that you have that's able to create tables and create shapes. It was fairly easy, although it was a little time consuming with all of the beds that I have. But I am enjoying it, and I'm so glad I gave it a shot. So I hope that you are working on planning your garden for this year. I know I'm excited for the warm weather. So happy gardening.